Hello everyone, I'm Tanuja from ENH iSecure and thank you for joining this demo session. This session is about Okta Sign-On policies. Hope you have gone through the presentation where we have covered about this in an overview. Now let us quickly move into the demo. I have logged into the Okta admin portal with my credentials and my account holds super admin privileges. We can delegate the administration of policies as well by creating a custom admin role and assign that to the desired administrators. For now, I am going with my super admin privileges to carry out the demonstration. This is the Okta dashboard for administrators. And let me move on to the global session policies which are under security tab. Once we are in the Global Session Policies tab, by default we have a policy named as Default Policy which governs the user and administrator session management in Okta. As you can see, the default policy is assigned to the Everyone group. We have multiple policies as per the business requirement. Policies can be assigned to a single or multiple groups. While creating a policy, we have to pick up the group for assignment. Once the policy is created, to secure the access further, we have rules. Rules play a crucial role in policies. Those are the actual settings, how to control the user session and enforce additional security checks to verify the user. There is no limit for the number of rules we can configure in the global session policy, but there should be at least one rule in the policy. Now the working of rules happens in priority order until one matches. We have to arrange the rules as per the business requirement and make sure the most restricted and out of network rules are set up at the bottom. Policy evaluation stops once it reaches the everyone group policy. To talk about rules, they operate on if and then method. To understand the user's IP settings, first navigate to the Networks tab. After that, you can proceed to the Global Session Policies tab to explore the remaining settings. Network zones are critical components of global session policies. They allow administrators to define specific IP ranges or geographical areas from which users can access resources. There are three types of network zones. IP zone. This is a list of specific IP addresses or ranges that are considered secure. For example, an organization might create an IP zone named corporate offices that includes all IP addresses from its corporate locations. This allows users logging in from these addresses to access internal application without additional authentication. Dynamic zone. This type uses conditions based on metadata such as geolocation or autonomous system number to determine whether access should be granted. For instance, a dynamic zone could block access from a known Tor exit nodes or certain countries deemed high risk. For example, a company may create a dynamic zone called Trusted Countries that includes the above locations. This zone would allow access from any users logging in from those countries while blocking access from others. Enhanced dynamic zone. These provide more granular control by combining dynamic location data with other criteria such as user attributes or device types. Now getting back to global session policy. Identity provider. Use the drop down menu to specify the identity provider. You have the flexibility to specify any third party identity provider to facilitate user authentication and enhances access management across your applications. authenticates via use the drop down menu to specify required means of authentication. For example, the Okta LDAP interface connects LDAP applications to Okta Universal Directory without requiring agents, enabling centralized authentication management and MFA implementation through network zones, while allowing exemptions for specific applications from MFA requirements. And behavior. Enter a behavior type or a named behavior. For high risk behaviors, be sure to set your MFA requirement to at every sign in. Let's delve into behavior detection for a brief overview, and then we can return to explore the remaining settings of global session policies. Behavior detection feature in the Okta dashboard is designed to enhance security by monitoring and analyzing user behavior experience during sign-on events. Behavior detection analyzes user sign-in patterns to create profiles based on typical events. This allows administrators to configure sign-on policies that respond to unusual behavior such as logging in from a new location or device. Behavior types. Administrators can add various types of behaviors to sign-on policies. Location behavior tracks changes in the geographical location of the user during sign-in. IP behavior evaluates the IP address used for sign-in, allowing for policies based on known safe or risky IPs. Device behavior monitors new devices being used for authentication, prompting for additional verification if a new device is detected. Velocity behavior analyzes the timing of login attempts from different locations to identify potentially suspicious activity. Now let us return to global session policy to explore the remaining settings and configurations available within this feature. A risk factor is any condition or behavior that may indicate a higher probability of unauthorized access. Okta's risk assessment system analyzes various data points such as IP addresses used to make a sign in behavior pattern, previous failed and successful attempts, and the routing information within the sign in request, and assigns a risk score to each login attempt, which influences the authentication process. A user attempts to log in from an unrecognized device, location, and suspicious IP address with no prior history can be called out for a high risky user. We can set policies basing on those risk scores. For a high risk users, it is always recommended to step up the authentication with multiple factors and trigger a verification for every sign on attempt. Users can gain access based on the authentication methods defined in the policy. User session establishment. Users can establish their session using any method that complies with the authentication policy. Users can also log in using a password. For example, if a user enters their password correctly, they can access the system. If MFA is required, the authentication policy will define what factors are acceptable. For instance, if a user logs in and MFA is required, they might need to enter a code sent to their phone. Prompting for MFA. Users must complete MFA each time they log in. This is useful for high security environments. Users are prompted for MFA if they log in from a new device or if their existing cookie has been cleared. This adds security when accessing from unfamiliar devices. Users will need to complete MFA again after a specified period of inactivity. For example, if MFA lifetime is set to 8 hours, users will be prompted for MFA after that time has passed. Okta Global Session Lifetime. It is advisable to set a maximum session lifetime. Example 8 hours to reduce risks of session hijacking. For example, after 8 hours, users would need to log in again. Session ideal time. If a user is inactive for 30 minutes, their session will expire. For instance, if a user logs in but doesn't interact within the system for 30 minutes, they will need to re authenticate. Coming to session cookie persistence, this setting means that when users close their browser and reopen it later, they will have to sign in again. This is recommended for better security. Now coming to authenticators, the Authenticators Administration API provides operations to configure which authenticators are available to end users for use when they sign into applications. End users are required to use one or more authenticators based on the security requirements of the authentication policy. Administrators can select from multiple types of authenticators, including knowledge based, possession based, and biometric factors. Enrollment policies. The system enables the creation of specific policies that dictate which authentication methods are mandatory or optional or disabled for different user groups, ensuring compliance with organizational security standards. Let's move on to authentication policies. Authentication policies and global session policies in Okta share certain conditions but serve distinct functions. While a user can gain access to Okta through the global session policy, this does not automatically grant them access to their applications. Organizations have the flexibility to create a specific authentication policies for each application or to develop a few policies that can be applied across multiple applications. This ensures that access requirements can be tailored to the unique needs of different applications within the organizations. To create an authentication policy, click on the Add Policy. Provide a name and description for the policy. If you want to add rules to an existing policy, click on Add Rule to create a new rule within the selected policy. Define a rule starts by entering the rule name. Set up if conditions which determine when this rule will be applied. These conditions can include various criteria. One of them is user type. To know about user type, consider a organization which got employees and contractors on its payroll and lets them use the organization's resources. For security reasons, as contractors are allowed to work with the third party devices, organizations want to apply stricter authentication requirements. We can create a user type as contractors and they could be included in the inclusion list. Next is group. If an organization wants to enforce multi-factor authentication for users in the finance group but not for those in marketing, they would include finance in the inclusion list. Followed by user option. If a company wants to ensure that only specific high level executives must use MFA when logging in, they would include those specific usernames in the inclusion list. Now it is with device state. We choose whether to apply the rule only to registered devices or any device to access the applications. Followed by device management. We can have third party mobile device management solutions integrated with Okta and ensure the devices that are managed by that MDM solution are aligned to access the application. Next, assurance policy. This provides a balanced approach to security by allowing users to access corporate resources from their personal devices while ensuring those devices meet essential security standards and are compliant, like meeting a set of operation system standards to access the application. This feature helps organizations protect sensitive data without imposing heavy management tools on users. thus enhancing both security and user experience. Followed by device platform. This works hand in hand with device assurance policy. If we set up device assurance policy in Okta, we won't have the option to choose specific device platform for this policy. Device platform is a subset of assurance policy, and if we want to have our global session policy based on device platform, then we can enable this option. Next is users IP address settings. We can include or exclude specific network zones. As previously explained in the global session policies, we can call out the network zones defined in the network section. Followed by risk level, which works on users risk score. We have talked about this in global session policy. We can define the rule based on the risk level low, medium and high. We can add a custom setting to use the expression language. These conditions conclude the AND factor, and now when those are met, then factor kicks in. First, we have to define whether to allow the user or deny the user. If it is allowed, call how the user should authenticate comes next. This setting controls what type of factors are required by the target application for a successful authentication. We have a two-factor types with a mixed variations. One factor type, a possession factor or any other authenticator supported by an Okta tenant. Two factor types, a password and any other supported factor or any combination of two supported factors.
Possession factor constraints. Phishing resistant. Ensure that authentication methods are designed to withstand phishing attacks. Hardware protector. Use hardware based solutions like security keys to enhance security. Required user interaction. Authentication must involve active participation from the user. Require PIN or biometric user verification. Users must verify their identity using a PIN or biometric data. Example, fingerprint, facial recognition. Authentication methods. Allow any method. Users can choose any available authentication method that meets security requirements. Disallow specific authentication methods. Certain authentication methods can be explicitly prohibited. Allow specific authentication methods. Only predefined authentication methods are permitted. We can specify the authentication methods here. Prompt for password authentication. Every time users sign into resource. This is the most secure option. After a specified time since last signing, it prompts if the user hasn't signed in for a while. When no Okta global session exists, require password entry if there is no existing session. Prompt for other authentication factors, similar conditions apply as with password prompts. Every time users sign in after a specified time since last sign in, when no global session exists. Let us dive into our use case. For enhanced security, when a remote workers attempt to access an application from a new device, multi-factor authentication is required. First, navigate to groups. Click on add group. Name it as remote workers. Hit on save. Now refresh the page. Next, go to remote workers group. Select assign people and add allies and Alex to this group. Then click assign applications. Select Salesforce and add it to this group. Now let us set up session policy. Navigate to global session policy. Click on add policy. Provide a name.
Assign this policy to the group remote workers. Within this policy, add a rule. Give the name for the rule. Set the behavior as new device. User session is any factor used to meet the authentication policy requirements. MFA is required. Set the Okta global session lifetime to 8 hours. Set the ideal time to 30 minutes. Hit on create rule. Now go to authenticators to enforce MFA. Click on enrollment. Click on add a policy. Give a name to this policy. Assign it to remote workers group and specify the required authenticators. Click on save. Click on add rule. Name the rule. Click on create rule. Now go to authentication policies. Click on add policy. Name it as and click on save. Add a rule within this policy. Give the name for the rule. Group membership includes for uh, remote workers group. Device state is registered. Specify authentication methods as Okta Verify, FastPass, Push and OTP. Click on Save. Finally, assign the Salesforce application to this authentication policy to complete the setup. I will first log in using the credentials of Alex from the remote workers group in this browser. As you can see, there is no prompt for an additional verification code at this time. Now let us attempt to access the same user account using a new browser in incognito mode. In this case, you will notice that the system prompts for multi-factor authentication, specifically asking for the Okta Verify code. This clearly illustrates that when a user from the remote workers group attempts to access the application from a new device, they are required to provide an extra verification code for added security. This concludes our demo session. Thank you for participating and I hope you found this information helpful.